TE300. Right. Hi, I'm JP, welcome to Norway, and the launch of 2024 Husqvarna FE and TE Enduro range. I've tried, but I can't find a more Scandinavian setting than this. It's just about typical. Just by way of a quick review of my riding impressions, things that I've thought about while I've been going around all day long here today on all of the models. The 150 2-stroke, 250 300 2-stroke with their new TDI fuel injected engines, and the 250, 350, 450 and 501 4-strokes. The headlines here are new suspension, new chassis, some engine changes, that TBI on the 2-stroke, but there's some quite big differences in the 4-stroke, the smaller 4-stroke engines, and it's a new braking system. First thing to say is the new chassis and the suspension. You know, it's quite a big difference. The new bikes are. But I'll put it simply, when you stand on the bike and you're riding up a hill, or you're tracking along, or you're going along a piece of trail through the woods that's like this, just all of the time the bikes want to stay on line better. They don't mind as much when you hit bumps. They want to keep going in a straight line. When you hit G out things, it doesn't throw the bike out of shape. When you jump off stuff and land, it's not such a catastrophe like it was with the old bikes. And just generally, the bike is better sorted, better suited to enduro. I'll drop a big name here. Juha Salminen is here on the launch, and he came over at one point and asked me what I was thinking about, because I was sitting there trying to suss out what I was finding when I was riding the bikes, because I've got to confess, less than a week ago I was riding the KTMs with the PDS system, and in lots of other ways the bikes are exactly the same, and across each of the models on the KTM I felt happy, I felt comfortable, and I felt like I could push on a bit more. I rode a few of the special tests there that were on that launch I rode them quite, you know, as well as I would, as fast as I wanted to go really. But on this launch, I'm finding when I try and push on a little bit, things get a bit out of control, a bit out of shape. Spent an age faffing about with the suspension clips. The new suspension is great also because you can just make quick adjustments, compression, high-speed compression on the rear, rebound, same on the front. You can make just easy, simple adjustments. And I still couldn't quite get the feeling right. I still felt like the bike was equal, front and rear, but I couldn't find a place where I was happy on the bike. And one thing that Juha said to me was, this type of terrain, you find yourself on and off the throttle a lot. So that's part of the reason. It's making the bike go up and down naturally. So that's one thing to think about. But the other key thing, the thing that the WP suspension guy helped me with, was the fundamental thing that a suspension specialist will tell you, is to set the sag. And that has made the bike much more consistent. And I've been riding around on standard settings, but with the rider sag set right, perfectly happy. Some of the stuff here is hard enduro going, you know, so there's the standard suspension suits that better. I think if we'd had any opportunity to do a hard grass, you know, a grass test, or you know, more of a cross test, more of a motocrossy type test, we'd have still been finding that there are limitations with the standard suspension. But I think that's obvious thing to say because it's not set. You know, the standard bikes are set up for standard riders. The key thing is that the standard bikes now and the standard suspension, this new exact suspension now, WP's exact suspension, is way better. Highlights in the suspension department worth picking out here are particularly in the forks, there's a new mid-valve piston inside there which is controlling the fork movement, controlling the oil flow and reducing the amount of foaming of oil. There's also a new hydrostop system there which is basically
and controlling better the final, very final part of the fourth leg movement. So for example, typically when you jump off a rock step or jump down something and land, much more control to it. Overall the forks feel like they sit a bit higher, they're much less inclined to collapse under load. And in the shock is the same amount of travel, 300 mil still, so that's not changed, but overall the shock is shorter, 15 mil, and lighter, 100 grams they claim.
One thing they've said to us is how the main chassis is more like the motocross. It's almost the same as the motocross chassis. So in that sense it's stiffer. But other things around the bike, engine mounts, triple clamps, this kind of thing, they're all working in the favour of enduro. They're tailored to enduro more, and the suspension settings are tailored to enduro more. So even though the actual kind of core of it is stiffer, the actual feeling is still pliable. There's still plenty of, it doesn't feel like you're on an XC bike, for example. It does feel like the enduro bike. So thumbs up from that. I like the lower footrest position, that suits me. It's one thing I always do on the standard bikes whenever I get them, KTM or Husqvarna or Gas, is to put lower footrests on. Now you don't have to because they're already 6 mil lower. A few things about the bike which are easier, nicer. They talk about the lots of places where you would service your own bike, do the work yourself. There's now a torque setting. It's written down there on all the places where you would want it. Every little bolt that should have a washer on the back of it has now got a little triangle on the side of the casing or wherever it is on the bike to show you that it should have that washer on there. So there's no error. I love the look of the bike. I do like the new graphics. I think it's a sweet looking bike, but I don't really like this solution here too much. It's a funny little clunky little addition to get into to adjust your suspension. It's dead easy to adjust your suspension, but it's got this funny little flappy old thing here. I'm not sure about that. Not sure about that solution. Another thing is on the KTM bikes there's a hole here, which they explained to me on that launch is for so the bikes can suck air into the airbox better. Well, if that's true, why isn't there a hole on this bike? All bikes now have mapping switches, and on the 2-strokes, 250 2-stroke, 300 2-stroke, that there is a more noticeable difference. So it really does make much more of a difference when you change from the softer map to the more powerful map, and I think that's a good thing. You can in this setting here that's behind me, we've been going up some pretty steep rocky hills, real hard enduro stuff, and it is honestly a benefit to put it in the softer map. But obviously there are other times when you want the full power, especially in the 250, which I've enjoyed the difference. It's now the 250 2-stroke now has got a bit more fire in it. It feels a bit more like a 2-stroke 250 2-stroke should be, and is, along with its mapping, is more distinct from the 300 now. So there are, in my opinion, more reasons to buy the 250.
Which way, TE300? Which way? This way.
One thing to definitely add in here is the differences between the old TPI engine and the new TBI. It feels a bit like the engine that they should have made to start with, really, and it's definitely an evolution. The bikes are now much cleaner revving, the throttle response is crisper, there's none of the inconsistencies of the older bikes, less so with the more recent TPIs, but definitely it's cleaned up its act, and the relationship between what you ask through the throttle, coming through the engine, and to the back wheel is much more direct. You feel much more in control of, more like you're getting what you asked for from the throttle, and it's behaving more like a 2-stroke should do.
Yeah, it's got a quick shifter, which is basically engages when you turn it on. It engages from second gear upwards, and it gives you the option to change up without using the clutch. And it's just a little bit of fun. It's an extra thing. It's no great shakes. I don't think I need it necessarily, but it's a thing. The traction control, we haven't had too much chance to test that here, to be perfectly honest, because it's bone dry, baking hot, and I guess the only times there would be some loose, rocky uphill climbs, but they're not the sort of place where traction control is really helping. So honestly, I couldn't say whether that's too much of a benefit. I've tried it before on the motocross bikes and know that it does make a difference. Just give you that extra feel, especially on the more powerful, bigger bikes. Anyway, it's an extra thing. The whole sort of switch gear is a bit neater, a bit tidier. Pro Taper bars are now quite a different bend. So with the lower footrests and the lower bar bend, there's now a bit more of an attack-minded riding position. They say they worked on that rider triangle thing, foot, pelvis, hands on handlebars, to try and get you in a better, more controlled riding position.
Let's talk about the Braktec brake systems, which are a new part fitted to this generation of Husqvarna models. They replaced the Magura systems, and it's a curious one because many thought that the Husqvarna range is the premium brand, gets the premium parts fitted to it, but now the story really is that KTM gets the premium parts. KTM has certainly got the Brembo braking system, which in my view is still a bit better, basically. You can put it as simply as that. In terms of feel and bite and power, consistency, this system, even though it's upgraded compared to previous generations, I think the Braktec system is still not on the same level as the Brembo system. I also found a little bit of inconsistency with the clutch biting point while we were riding round. I kept having to adjust it across a couple of different bikes. This was. And another thing to point out, which I haven't really mentioned so far, is the vibrations coming through the bigger bikes, the 450 and the 500 models. Something's changed with this new chassis, and it means there's quite a lot of vibes coming through your feet. Worth pointing that out because it's a genuine thing. I found it also on the KTMs.
Big changes to the chassis and suspension. Still big changes in the engine department, but they are less important overall. I think the bigger, more important thing for me on the 2024 model Husqvarnas is how much nicer it is to ride them in enduro settings. So if that's been Husqvarna's aim, to make a better enduro bike, which obviously it is every time they update their models, but for sure they've achieved their goal. It's about time they had better suspension on them. Everybody says that, but it's true, and I can confirm that the standard suspension now is way better. It does control the bike better. I think one thing that's sort of key to it now, I mentioned Juha before, here Klang, I've dropped his name again, but I'll credit him with this statement. He said it really well. He said that before it felt like when you were riding along, if you hit a hole or you came up against a rock or a step or something, it felt like the bike wanted to go into things, whereas now the chassis and the suspension seems to want to keep going forwards. And after he said that, I walked away and I was sort of riding around thinking, what does he mean? Is that true? And I tested it, and it's absolutely true. So obviously 13 world championship titles to his name doesn't come along easily, and he does know what he's talking about, quite obviously. But for me to relate that to myself as an average expert level rider or whatever, is I took it away with me and started thinking, and I think it's the truth. So when you are riding, hitting those bumps, trying to hit your lines, for a start, these new bikes are more accurate. They hold a line, you can pick a line, you can change lines better when you're going along second, third gear and you're going up a track and you think, I need to be over there. They are more accurate, you feel more able to do that. But also when you are hitting things that the old bikes would have got out of shape on, and honestly, when I was riding around there a few times when I was coming up, I saw something and I thought, oh no, this is going to make me get out of shape, and you're tensing up, anticipating it doing something like the old bikes would, It now doesn't seem to do that anywhere near as much. So the bike's ability to soak up the bumps and keep on keeping on, much better.
There are obviously many details about the new 2024 Husqvarna Enduro models that we haven't covered in this video, but it was always intended to be a test of the new bikes, a first impressions riding test based on the world press introduction in Norway. We'll obviously do more when we get back, and obviously there are more details on Enduro 21 as ever. In the meantime, please excuse the wobbly wheelie on a wobbly bridge.